On this episode of the Layover Live, we're talking data with experts from Destination Analysts and Arrivalist. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 118 of the Layover Live, where we bring you the top article from the Layover each week. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Digital Marketing, joined by some special guests today, Erin Francis-Cummings of Destination Analysts. So, Erin, welcome to the show. And good friend of ours at SimpleView, Matt Clement from Arrivalist. So, Matt, welcome to the show. So, if you guys are here, we're talking about data, right? And so, the article of the week this week comes from Marketing Land, where we're talking about, hey, despite unknowns and continued challenges that are in the space, media agencies like SimpleView are starting to shift our gears towards this next phase as we're starting to see a lot of travel indicators and data pointing in that direction. Now, listen, data brings a lot of opportunity for DMOs, but it can also bring a lot of complexity at the same time. In travel, people often take weeks or even months to plan their vacations, often with dozens of digital touch points along the way, and things have even gotten more complicated now with everything happening in the world of coronavirus. So how do we as marketers make sense of all this? How can we prepare for all of this? These are some of the questions that we are getting asked now daily at SimpleView. And certainly this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, right? The South response is going to be much different than it is in the West region, and there's many factors in that. So oftentimes we're going to get asked, so what do we do? How do we know when to turn our marketing back on? And what we're hopefully showing you guys today are 3 indicators to help with just that. So in doing that, I'm calling these 3 indicators the travel indicators trifecta, and we're going to get into that a little bit shortly. But first, let me introduce my guests who probably don't need introductions at all, as you probably all know them very well, as they're some of the best providers of data and insights in our space. So first, Erin, let's start with you. Why don't you give everybody a little background on yourself?
Hello, everyone from the California side of Lake Tahoe. I'm Erin Francis-Cummings, the President and CEO of Destination Analysts. We're a market research firm that provides the travel industry a breadth of insights into travel audiences, brands, and marketing performance. Our motto is do your research, so we ensure organizations have access to excellent marketing intelligence to increase the positive impact of tourism.
Well, again, welcome to the show and super happy to have you here, Erin. And then Matt, how about a little background on yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Matt Clement. I'm Senior Vice President for Marketing here at Arrivalist. We're a geolocation data company that has been focused on the travel and tourism industry since 2012. We provide both visitation intelligence as well as media measurement services here. What we try to do for our clients is to provide intel on where people are coming from, how much time they're spending in our destinations, where they're going while they're in destination, as well as understanding which of our media efforts are most likely to result in visitation and longer lengths of stay. And so very much like Erin, we're focused on helping our clients increase the impact of tourism on their local communities.
Well, great. Well, welcome both of you to the show. Really excited to have you here, really because I think some of what you're doing, married with some of the things that we're looking at as well, are really starting to show some of these indicators, right? You guys have been incredible resources along the way to really help DMOs, give them the information they need. But now as we're kind of feeling like we're moving out of this kind of destination crisis mode and into more of a relaunch or a rebound mode, where we're starting to turn some marketing back on. Even this week alone, we're starting to see a lot of marketers that we work with starting to turn their paid search accounts back on and things of that nature. But a lot of DMOs, and understandably so, are still pretty apprehensive about that. And the reason is that we're all looking at different things. We're looking at different data sources and a bunch of different things that are out there. But I wanted to narrow it down and have you guys here because I think some of the things that we're providing and you guys are providing are some of the best ways to understand when we should start planning for those things and turning those things back on. And the first thing that we want to look at always is the sentiment of the industry and what's happening. What are travelers saying? And Erin, there's nobody better to talk about those things than you, as travel sentiment seems to be moving in much more of a positive direction over this last few weeks. According to some of the recent findings from your guys' survey, which I know you guys are doing every single week with this great information. So maybe I'll turn it over to you and just tell us some of the insights that you've gleaned from some of your latest sentiment survey that is indicating some positive movement towards a recovery.
Jason, I'm glad you said that about consumer sentiment. since we are a consumer spending driven economy, and that's how people are feeling is really crucial to success. So openness to travel is measured but growing gradually. There were a number of positive movements we saw this week in how American travelers are thinking, feeling, and behaving. Concerns about contracting the virus and the impact it will have on personal finances and the national economy are high, but have retreated to levels seen back in mid-March. Comfort going out in one's own community for leisure has inched up. The percent of American travelers who feel they will avoid travel until coronavirus is resolved continues to slowly decline. The perceived safety of various travel activities, including flying, staying in a hotel, visiting an attraction, and dining in a restaurant, is markedly better than the lows seen 1 month ago. There's less agreement that travelers will be avoiding conferences and conventions. And this week there was a 5% growth in interest in taking a getaway in the next month, and excitement to learn about travel destinations also improved. Finally, 45.3% of American travelers estimate they will end up taking their next road trip sometime between now and the end of August.
Wow, that's really, really good stuff. So again, love to see that sentiment, some of that positiveness starting to return. Listen, it hasn't come back all the way, but it's moving in that direction, and it's going to be a little bit of a slow movement. We get it, but this also may be the reason, Erin, why we're starting to see increases in organic traffic on DMO websites. These are all good indicators, right? Organic helps us to understand the intent and the mindset of travelers and what interests are resonating best with them. And so that positive sentiment makes a pretty good case of why we're seeing this uptick. Now, since the beginning of all this crisis, SimpleView has been tracking about 200 different DMO websites across North America. For 4 straight weeks now, DMO web traffic is trending up. In fact, since April 12th, we are seeing organic traffic up by more than 72% across DMO websites, which is really good. And the sentiment of the traveler has a lot to do with that, I feel. So getting closer and closer now, I think, to these 2019 numbers, which is awesome. And we see DMOs in the South are really leading the way with that recovery, especially in the fly markets. And I think a lot of that is surprising, to be honest with you, but in some ways not surprising in the fact that a lot of the South has really been some of the first to really ease back on some restrictions, right? And now another question I think that we get asked a lot is, hey, great, so things are trending in the right direction. Which categories then are seeing the highest consumer interest across search? As we deal with search a lot. We're one of the largest in the space that are dealing with search. And so taking a look at some Google data, it's really showing a lot of positive traction with outdoor activity searches lately, particularly with campgrounds and RVing, which are both showing double-digit demand growth over the last few weeks. So again, people are starting to get out there. They're starting to look at and aspiring to travel and starting to plan those things. It looks like with a lot of outdoor type activities, naturally with social distancing leading the way, at least as it relates to searches and web traffic. And these are all good signs that again, travel interest is returning. And most likely it's going to be coming first from drive markets and regional tourism, which should be of no surprise to anybody, as it's been touted from the rooftops for a few weeks now across many webinars. So this kind of leads into our third indicator, which I think is really, really important. I've got the expert here to talk about it, Matt Clement, and that's drive market demand. So we've all heard the drive markets are going to come back first, and Arrivalist has some unbelievable data that is confirming just that. So, tell us, Matt, a little bit more about the latest drive market data you are seeing with your guys' daily travel index, which is a great resource.
Yeah, Jason, and thank you for that kind word. I appreciate that very much. I think you hit the nail on the head with your observations. It does certainly appear that people are beginning to make the decision once again to get back in their cars and trucks and take a road trip. We built the Daily Travel Index to really focus exclusively on those types of trips, the trips by automobile. And, we observed, in terms of trip activity, really the low point for the country was back on the first weekend of April, around the 3rd, Friday the 3rd of April 3rd, sorry. And since that point, we are up about 48% from that low point. and as a country for trips over 50 miles. And that puts us around back to the baseline that we established. Now, we used the average trip volume by car for the month of February to establish that baseline. And what that means is that for a typical weekend back in February, you'd see a Friday or Saturday somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% above that baseline. And here in May, we're seeing weekends that are a little bit of a range depending on what part of the country you're talking about, but at or maybe even just a little bit below that baseline. And that really underscores the fact that while the trends are certainly positive and accelerating even, we still have a pretty decent way to go before we're even back to what would be considered normal volume in February. You mentioned the South, and certainly there are some big regional differences in how the trends are moving. For parts of the country like the Southeast, the Midwest, the Southwest, we've seen increases, in excess of 50% from the low point, and even more growth in the longer range trips. So, we're measuring from when someone leaves home to where they're going, and that's our measurement. So it's a radial measurement of distance. And for Texans, for instance, we're seeing some pretty healthy increases in the trips that are a little bit longer, those that might suggest even a possible overnight stay. So trips over 100 miles or over 250 miles. In other parts of the country like New York and the Northeast in general, those trends have been a little bit more moderate. But still, we're seeing some very interesting data come in from those parts of the country. New York in particular had 2 weekends where they had really, really good weather and had huge spikes in the amount of trip activity, 50 to 100 miles from home. So there's positives even in the parts of the country that are still really dealing, that are the hardest hit and still dealing with the pandemic crisis. Out in the West, we're seeing similarly very positive trends, really not that far behind regions of the country like the Southeast or the Southwest, but a little bit more moderate. Certainly, with those states still having some stay-at-home orders in place, we would expect it to be a little bit more moderate. Just as a final point, we've also been measuring malls, and it's really been interesting to look at the visitation to malls, and what those correlations might be to our attractions, back in our destinations as they reopen, or approach reopening dates. The first weekend, it was about 2 weeks ago, for most malls to reopen, and they really opened to very sparse crowds. In some cases, here in Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance, we had malls opening up to, 8% of what would be considered normal volume for a Saturday in February. So quite a bit below what we'd expect in May. But a lot of those places rebounded in their second weekend, so Mother's Day weekend, this past weekend. And had volumes that were about 50% of February normal. So, again, a long way to go for our malls as well. But, all the trends are continuing to point up. And so I think as we look at Memorial Day and into June, if we're fortunate enough to not have any resurgence of the virus, I don't think it would be surprising to see us, for many of our destinations, to see volumes that, are approaching something that's, certainly normal for a weekend in February, and maybe above that, maybe closer to normal. I'm going to say optimistically, maybe 70% of normal for May or for June. But certainly we'll see how that goes, and all of you that are tuning in today can head over to the website and check that data out for yourself. Certainly.
Yeah, and I think Matt, you really good information there, by the way. And I think you're spot on with a lot of that. Interestingly, I agree with you in the fact that Memorial Weekend is going to be an indicator, I think, of where things are starting to move. Interesting also that you're seeing the same traffic trends that we're seeing, or the same data rather, showing the upticks in the West and the South and Southeast, very similar to what we're seeing on website traffic. But it is complex, right? It is not going to be a one size fits all. It's going to be this waves of things that are going to change. Some places will bounce back faster than others naturally. And that's why there's not this kind of one size fits all solution, but we do have to look at some of these indicators. You mentioned some of the mall activity and things of that nature. These are all things to start to look at, which is really, really good information. And so, again, this trifecta of recovery indicators, right? Sentiment trending in a positive direction, organic traffic and searches starting to return, although not close to normal, but getting back there. And then this increase in some of this drive market indicators is important, right? So the question I think then is, what do we do with all of this, right? And so, Erin, I'm going to kick this over to you. What advice do you have for destination marketers then out there? What actions should DMOs be doing right now in terms of their recovery planning, in your opinion?
Well, in our excitement to get back to our version of normal, and trust me, I share it, I recommend you do not lose sight of what is paramount to travelers right now, and that is protecting their health and safety. When we ask travelers what they're going to prioritize in their lifestyles, avoiding COVID-19 is what Americans are most in sync on. The DMO can lead in so many ways to ensure that travelers feel safe to visit and are protected when they visit, from policy support to the distribution and communication of health guidelines and information. Right now, DMOs are enjoying a level of trust that I haven't seen in my almost 2 decades studying these organizations and the use of their assets, as travelers are placing much more trust in these official resources. So take advantage of this opportunity to lead. One aside, though, do be careful and take your local residents into consideration. We continue to see that despite wanting to travel themselves, many Americans still don't feel like their own communities are ready for visitors. That being said, the travel industry certainly delivers experiences that meet people's emotional needs right now. And travel advertising brings people joy. We saw that in the data this week. So in the words of a traveler we recently surveyed, we'll be back and spending again when we feel safe.
There you go. And Erin, that is great advice, right? I could not agree with you more. People are going to want to feel safe. And you made also a great point about locals. Locals are, are they going to be welcoming to a big influx of tourists? The answer is probably not right now, not right away at least. So really, really good advice. And I think, Matt, I'm going to give you the same question then. What is your advice then for DMOs out there trying to figure out their recovery strategies?
Yeah, sure, Jason. Well, I mean, first, I want to be cognizant of the fact, in echoing you and Erin's points, that there's a lot of thresholds we have to cross first with local sentiment, with health guidelines, with the reopening status of our attractions and restaurants and other places that our visitors want to experience while they're in town. But assuming that we've met all those thresholds as a destination, the first thing I would say is use the daily travel index as a tool to help you understand what trip volume and or trip activity looks like for the drive markets that are applicable to you. So if you're Colorado and one of your primary summertime origin markets is Texas, you would want to go and look at Texas and trips over 250 miles. And that'll help you understand, is that volume there? Are the trends going up? Same thing if you're in the Northeast, but just looking at maybe shorter ranges. So if you're a northeastern destination, close to Philadelphia or New York, for instance, you've got a ton of population that's not that far from you. It might not be as important for you whether or not northeastern folks are, taking long 250-mile plus road trips. You could really just focus on looking at the activity in the 50 to 100 or 100 to 250-mile ranges, since that's really what's most applicable for your target or potential target markets. My second piece of advice would really be to have those conversations with your media partners, focusing on media channels that are going to be able to convert quickly. The unfortunate fact is that we face a lot of uncertainty this fall and winter about a resurgence of the virus. Certainly, we're hoping that's not the case. But there's an element of risk management that I think is applicable to what we're doing in the spring here, where we might normally be, deploying a lot of resources, brand awareness level stuff at the top of the funnel and potential fly markets, places where we want to, hopefully attract high value, long length of stay type visitors. But given sort of the uncertainties that we face long term, I think it's appropriate to really, if you're able to, and I know some island destinations in places of that nature can't, but for those that can, I think it's really important to focus on those dry markets and quick conversions, as well as focusing on messaging both on the website as well as with your paid media partners, and influencing those day trippers and weekenders to convert to week-long lengths of stay. So as an example, if you're Galveston and you're looking at Houston, a good question is how can we get folks in Houston to go from, a day trip to an overnight, for instance. So those are my two pieces of advice for you, Jason.
Yeah. Hey, really good advice from, two of some of the best in data in this industry, guys. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Matt. Really, really, really good stuff there. So I really appreciate you guys stopping by and sharing your insights today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you guys here. And listen, as Matt was alluding to, and Erin, the space is complex. And if you need help at all with any planning whatsoever, we've created a resource on our website for marketing in the new normal. Take a look at it if you get a chance. It walks you through Sybil View's approach to this, as we feel like this is going to play out over the course of a couple of years at least. Nobody really knows, but having a plan going in, I think, helps. We're kind of moving now, as we said, some of the indicators based on some of the stuff we shared today, as we're moving in from a crisis mode into recovery mode. Soon after that, we'll start to move into a growth and then a thrive mode. So please check out that resource if you get a chance. It's really, really good. And thank you for tuning in each and every week. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available by podcast if you like to consume us that way on iTunes and Spotify. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our guest. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.